he has a ton of basic lands, and he is fully able to make use of that as kind of a huge silver bullet against a ton of decks which are not prepared for a Blood Moon. His opponent, Donivan Abraham, playing a, we were calling this before Fairy Blade. It is a Stoneblade variant running a fairy package of Spellstutter Sprites and Vendilion Clicks, not to mention Restoration Angel to reset either of those.
And the Miracle deck has also a 15 one-of sideboard for anyone at home who likes those. Donivan leads off with a couple duels, Alex with an island, and adds Flooded Strand. You see a hand that looked like it had a Spell Pierce in it, possibly. Mutavault comes down for Donivan. And Mutavault, pretty decent card in this matchup. Doesn't die to Alex's sweepers, gets in under counterbalance. It is vulnerable to the 4 Swords to Plowshares, but not a bad one.
Now, Alex Binek and Donivan Abraham are both very much on the bubble if they win. So if either of these players loses, they are not in. If they win, they're going to be looking at tiebreaker math to see if they make it.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting sweat for each of them, depending on who wins, and Brainstorm for Alex, and then a fetch.
Now, it has been about 12 and a half hours since we started broadcasting today. That is a lot of Legacy, as well as some Standard. We started this morning with the semifinals of the Standard tournament. Eric Rill, our champion in Standard, with Naya midrange.
Yep, a very exciting match there. We see, looks like 2 Force of Wills in Alex's hand, and a Detention Sphere. Looks like we have a Brainstorm, couple of Swords to Plowshares, a land, and 1 or 2 more cards in Donovan's hand. Both players having, well, Donivan having cards that in those 2 Swords to Plowshares might not be that great against Alex's deck with just 3 Stoneforge Mystics as far as creatures goes, and we see one there now. Spellstutter Sprite coming down. We'll see if Alex lets that resolve.
Comes into play, trigger happens, and he activates the Mutavault. The Mutavault is all creature types. Makes it a 2 for the number of fairies in play, and the Spellstutter Sprite effectively counters now the Stoneforge Mystic.
I think actually what they may be discussing here is that Donivan may have done things in the wrong order. I believe Spellstutter Sprite's ability can only target a spell on the stack that has casting cost equal to or less than the number of fairies.
Did he not do it in time? He waited too long?
So the Sprite came into play.
He waited too long.
And he wasn't able to target the Mystic. So this Mystic is going to resolve.
Okay. I thought he was still responding to it.
Yeah, I think just a little misunderstanding on Donovan's part of how that card works. Swords, looks like it's going to come down, try to take care of that Mystic before it can cheat the Batterskull into play that it just found. And Alex with a whole handful of cards. We'll see if he wants to fight over that Swords. And
a little Spell Pierce.
Used at a really nice time when Donovan's tapped down to just 1 available mana. Probably, that card might be not useful pretty soon in this match, so Alex taking advantage of that.
Wow, I'm looking at his hand, Donivan Abraham. This is taking me back in time. Sword of Feast and Famine is in Donovan's hand.
Yeah, and if we see that start to connect, could be a lot of trouble for Alex. We may see him cast that, and
boom.
Yeah,
there it is.
Says, do you have anything for this? And we know that Alex has a couple counters. We'll see what he's willing to use on this. A Flooded Strand, sacrificed by Donivan. Going and grabbing a non-basic. So Donivan here with 5 non-basics in play. So, that Blood Moon that we mentioned may become relevant at some point in this match. And Alex fetches out a Tundra. I think we're going to see, Swords to Plowshares on that Spellstutter Sprite. I believe it was in response to the equip, so I don't think we're going to see a 3-point life gain, but just 1.
That was sad. I kind of wanted to go back in time for a second there.
Yeah, Sword of Feast and Famine connecting definitely brings me back to standard format, and it's even been played in Legacy a bit, but not as much as the other swords. We see the Tension Sphere come down to take care of that sword, so doesn't look like we're going to get to see that, at least not in this game, and passes the turn back to Donivan. With a Mutavault, a couple of Volcanic Islands, couple of Tundras, Stoneforge, Brainstorm, Swords to Plowshares, and one other card in hand. Stoneforge Mystic comes down. Donivan deciding what he's going to get, and chooses Batterskull. Alex has a Batterskull of his own that we may see cheated into play with his Stoneforge Mystic at the end of this turn. And shuffles up. Batterskull probably shouldn't be staying in play. Yep, goes back to Donovan's hand. And Alex does use his Stoneforge Mystic at the end of turn, and Swords to Plowshares in response, getting rid of it before the Batterskull comes down.
Batterskull still in play, though.
Yep, so we have Alex with 5 lands, a Batterskull, and a Detention Sphere, detaining Sword of Feast and Famine against Donivan with 2 Volcanic Island, 2 Tundra, Mutavault, Stoneforge Mystic, and a Batterskull of his own that is in his hand. An attack from Alex for 4 and lifelink, so Alex gains 4.
Fetch land. I think I see a... Here it comes. Dun, 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 dun. Jace the Mind Sculptor, which is better than something. I forget what.
Maybe all?
All.
Is that the correct answer?
Brainstorm in response.
Yeah, Donovan gonna see if he can find anything, and it doesn't look like it. He has a Vendilion Click that he may be able to use to attack that Jace down, but this is not going to be good for Donivan. Generally not good when your opponent's Jace resolves, pretty much no matter which Jace it is in which format. We saw a lot of Jaces in Standard too yesterday.
You know, I've seen Jason play a number of times, and nowhere more than Legacy have I seen it bury the opponent. I'm sure that it would probably do a similar job of burying an opponent in Vintage. I just haven't seen a Jason play in Vintage.
Yeah, it does get some play in Vintage, but Legacy is where you tend to see lots of copies of it in decks just like this. Really doing a lot of work.
Our director Shoebox is like, yeah, Jace buries people in Vintage. I just don't have much of an opportunity to play Vintage these days, so I'm not really sure what Vintage looks like anymore.
And looking at what Alex has, we see actually an energy field drawn by that Jace. It's an interesting card. I'm wondering if we can get it up on screen here.
Energy Field means that you'll receive no damage as long as you don't put anything in the graveyard. And in combination with the aforementioned Rest in Peace, makes a combo where you're immune to damage, essentially. Now, on the other hand, should a card go to your graveyard, your Energy Field is lost. You have to sacrifice it.
Yeah, so Rest in Peace, being a replacement effect, exiling the card instead of having it go to the graveyard. If you have both of those in play, the sacrifice trigger on Energy Field not going to come up. Nice little combo there. One of quite a few that Alex has in this Miracles, Enlightened, Tutor, Artifact, Enchantment control deck.
Yeah, it's a Miracles deck, basically. This set of cards in there, we were talking before about the mishmash of things you could do. This is a Miracles deck, and what it does is has that package, the Enlightened Tutor package, that includes a bunch of different small parts.
Yeah, he's chosen not to go with a card like Entreat the Angels for his finisher, and has a lot more, few like diverse one-ofs that can be great in very specific situations.
Alex Binek, firmly in control of this game. Jace the Mind Sculptor casts Brainstorm. Casting Brainstorm every turn for no mana, that seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, no mana and no card cost either, so just adding a card to Alex's hand every turn and giving him a choice of what cards he wants to keep, what cards he wants to put away. Giving Alex just a lot of options. We see a Force of Will in his hand that he has plenty of mana to cast using its regular casting cost. I guess it's most regularly cast for 0, but its normal casting cost is 5. We see a top come down, Sensei's Divining Top, and a fetch land there, so Alex can check out the cards he put back with Brainstorm and one more. If he doesn't like him, he can shuffle them away and look again. We see Batterskull come down for Donivan, and Batterskull's facing off, but Alex has a Jace and a top, so, well, Vendilion Click comes down for Donivan. And,
and Donovan's like, no, this is a germ, really. And he's like, no, use this germ. No, I've got my own germ, come on.
And Click here representing an ability for Donivan to take out Jace if it resolves. I do see that Force of Will in Alex's hand, so I think he's going to fight over this, but we'll see. Worth noting also that Donivan has a Karakas in play, so he can perform a little loop that we talked about earlier, casting Vendilion Click, checking out your opponent's hand, taking a card, returning your own Vendilion Click with that Karakas, and then casting it again to sort of lock your opponent out every turn. And actually it does resolve, despite Alex having a regular old counterspell and a Force of Will, and that energy field to potentially remove to Force of Will, so not scared of that Vendilion Click.
This is such, like, the battle of these huge forces going on, but one of those forces is Jace.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what Alex had on the top of his library that he put there with top that made him choose to let that Vendilion Click resolve. It seems like a little bit of a risky move. I mean, having counter spells there is always nice, but the Click is coming in at the Jace, so we'll see if Alex has anything to do about that. And looks like Batterskull also attacking, going to be blocked. Well, Germ attacking, equipped with Batterskull, going to be blocked by the Germ on the other side. And we may see a Miracled. Yep. Sensei's Divining Top tapped, draws a card. The first card Alex has drawn this turn, Donovan's turn, and it is Terminus. It looks like it's going to be cast for its Miracle cost. Makes it a lot clearer why Alex let that resolve. We're going to see, looks like Karakas was used in an attempt to return that Vendilion Click to Donovan's hand. And Alex chooses not to cast the Terminus. Not really being interested in firing that off if it's not going to take care of the Click.
For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here with Ben Hayes. We are watching the final round of Swiss between these two control decks, Alex Binek with a Miracles deck filled with awesome little combos that he can find with Enlightened Tutor, and Donivan Abraham, who is playing a Stoneblade deck with a little fairy package in it in the form of Spellstutter Sprite, Vendilion Click, and Restoration Angel to reuse both of those abilities at instant speed. These two players facing off with fairly similar board states. The one player, Alex Binek, already has a Jace the Mind Sculptor in play, so certainly has a strong advantage because of that.
He does, and Donivan has that Stoneforge Mystic to go along with his Batterskull, making it a bit better. That allows him to return his Batterskull to his hand for 3 mana, activate the Mystic, get the Batterskull down again, and it makes another Germ, which essentially puts a 4/4 into play as many times as Donivan wants. Alex can do the same thing, just takes a lot more mana, and he has to do it on his own turn. So we're going to see a bunch of mana tapped, and see what Alex is doing with that. Both pointing at various Batterskulls, their own Batterskulls, each other's Batterskulls.
I like how you put that, pointing at batter skulls.
Yeah, they were. Alex pointed at his batter skull, then he pointed at Donovan's batter skull. Donovan pointed at Alex's batter skull. I think they're just having fun. Looks like.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And we're going to see a Stoneforge activation, and then in response to that activation, Donovan is going to return batter skull, let the Mystic activation resolve, putting batter skull back into play. Now he's got a 4/4. And Alex's batter skull returns to his hand. Looks like that all happened at the end of Donovan's turn. So, believe everything you just saw Donovan do was in response to Alex choosing to return his own batter skull. And I think we're going to see the batter skull I was just talking about come back down, possibly. Or Alex could choose to fire off that Terminus. He also has a Jace, so we'll see what he decides to do with that.
First move. So many options. I don't know if I want to do that, he says. Maybe I'll do something else.
Yeah, we see a top, that batter skull that Alex just returned, and those counter spells from earlier in Alex's hand. Top comes down. Yeah, Alex really with a lot of options here. Gonna use Brainstorm. Sees 3 new cards. Can't quite see what those are. One appears to be a Spell Pierce. Not as good in this late game scenario. And I think he also drew, I believe that card in front is Rest in Peace.
The combo.
So one piece of his combo. He has a backup Jace, a counterbalance, regular counterspell, and that Rest in Peace. So we'll see, as well as the batter skull. We'll see what he chooses to do here. And Alex, thinking over his options, just passes the turn. So if I'm not mistaken, there is a Terminus somewhere between Alex's hand and the top couple cards of his deck, unless that was shuffled away at some point. But top allows him to draw that at instant speed and cast it for its miracle cost at instant speed. We're going to see Donovan point at batter skull and point at Jace. Alex activates that top and then activates it for the draw ability. Donovan maybe thinking about responding to that. And he reveals Terminus. We'll see how Donovan feels about that one.
Donovan's like, wait a second, but he already drew something, I think. I think that's what he's asking there. You know, I'm not 100% sure.
Maybe. We're getting from our director that he may be able to use his Vendilion Click to get that Terminus out of Alex's hand. Not 100% sure how that interaction works.
Yeah, this is a very narrow rules situation. Drawing the card, getting the miracle, the Terminus is officially in his hand, and there is a trigger that happens that's a window of opportunity for things to be done.
Yeah, so a lot of times you'll see people look at their top card and just flip it onto the table, but that card actually does get cast from the hand. It's drawn, then it's revealed, then after it's revealed you can choose to cast it.
Now, Donovan, after having confirmed that, lets the Terminus happen.
Yeah. So, a little bit of a rules lesson, and then we see Terminus. Down comes top again, and Jace facing off against just a batter skull now. And Mutavault also, actually down there for Donovan.
Now we have counterbalance, top, Jace, and we see the response here, Vendilion Click attempting to make some headway. I believe Alex Binek has counter magic though. Counter spell?
I believe he does have counter spell. This is a matchup, Stoneblade and more so actually blue-white control, that I've played a lot of. I like to be on the blue-white control side in this. think both decks tend to play a controlling game anyway, and I like to have more of my cards dedicated to doing that if that's what I'm going to end up doing. I don't feel that either deck can play the aggro role that well, so I'd prefer to be Alex in this matchup. And we see Alex putting a couple cards back, just figuring out what to do here. Hand of Jace and looks like 3 other cards. And we'll see Donivan untap, picks up Spell Pierce, I think that is.
It's got a Restoration Angel, Swords to Plowshares, Spell Pierce, and I think a land? He keeps moving his hand pretty quickly, so I got the other ones.
Yeah, there may be a land there.
That is an interesting alternate art. I should say altered.
That's an island.
Altered art island.
Yeah, that is an island. We saw a nice altered tundra earlier today that I had no idea what it was.
The rule of thumb with altered art, if it is at all difficult to figure out what a card is, it's not legal. And it might even not be legal if it's fairly figure-outable.
Yeah, in this case, looks like Donovan's is okay. It's
that
just
looks okay to me.
Pretty blue land, so we can assume island, and it is an island. So
yeah.
Donivan thinking about what he wants to do with these cards. Swords, not much use here. Spell Pierce. He's going to have to work pretty hard to get good use out of that Spell Pierce with Alex having 7 mana and a counterbalance on top in play. We may see Restoration Angel come down because that's one that's harder to counter using counterbalance. And we just see what I think is a main phase Restoration Angel. And a Brainstorm.
Looking for a Jace to put on top.
Believe Alex has a Jace in hand.
Okay, Elspeth is the other card he could find.
Yep, and Helm of Obedience also costs 4, right?
Oh, there, yeah, you're correct.
So one more there that he could hit, and he does have a Jace. Reveals it to counterbalance. Takes out that Angel.
And Alex Binek looks like completely in control of this game. Donivan, though, not giving up.
Yeah, and counterbalance really taking this game over. I mean, we saw that Spell Pierce in Donovan's hand. Alex tapped out, but knowing that Alex has the top and the counterbalance, that he can flip that top at any point and counter any 1-mana spell, Donovan's Spell Pierce was useless in that situation.
Now, this game, to my mind, seems to have hinged on that moment very early in the game where Donivan missed his timing on Mutavault to make the Spellstarter sprite not able to counter a Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, that Stoneforge Mystic getting a Batterskull that allowed Alex to basically have parity with Donivan in that sense was pretty big. I mean, if Donivan had been the only one with the Batterskull and been able to get that online and attacking earlier, this game might have gone pretty differently. So probably not a mistake that Donovan's going to make again in the future. Those are the ones that tend to stick with you.
Yeah. Spell Pierce, Swords to Plowshares, the cards in Donovan Abraham's hand. Alex Binek passes the turn back, content to sit in this fortress.
Yep, rest in peace. Detention Sphere, Counterbalance, and Sensei's Divining Top, a nice little army of artifacts and enchantments there.
Mutavault comes on in. It meets Swords to Plowshares.
And we see Force of Will from Donivan, removing Spell Pierce. We'll see if Alex has anything for that. Looks at the top 3. Rearranges.
There's the Batterskull. And Donivan now completely out of weapons except for that Batterskull that he has in play. But the Batterskull on top of Alex Binek's library can just float there, so that Batterskull that Donivan has won't be able to hit the table. I see no way for Donivan to actually successfully win this one unless a Christmas miracle happens.
Yeah, one thing about Countertop is it can be hard to always have the right casting costs on top and keep them on top, keep them floating there. But Jace brainstorming every turn lets you put any of the 2 casting costs from your hand on top, really giving you tons of options with counterbalance.
Donivan Abraham going to his sideboard. He's seen enough of that first game, and he has some good cards, though. He's got Pyroblast, which is certainly going to be useful. Flusterstorm, which is a solid card in Counterspell Wars. Spell Pierce to fight for those early fights. Disenchant, which is a card that's going to be very useful against an Enlightened Tutor deck. And I think that might be where I would stop from his sideboard, personally.
So looking at Alex's sideboard, it is that 15 one-ofs that I mentioned. Going down the list, he has Counterspell, which I don't think we'll see come in. I think in post-board games, he's looking for more answers in the way of something like a Pyroblast or a Red Elemental Blast. So 15 one-ofs, 2 that do almost the same thing. I think we'll definitely see those coming in. I would not be surprised if we saw another Counterbalance come in, seeing how good it was in that game. And anything else you'd bring in? The Supreme Verdict, maybe?
I like the Supreme Verdict because it's able to shut down the possible elements that are aggro control like from Donivan Abraham. And I also really like Dust Bowl. Dust Bowl is a card that is really useful in the control mirrors, where you can turn your extra land into essentially starting to tear your opponent's mana up. And if you don't have extra land around to throw away, it is just a land to have in play.
Yeah, and extra lands in this kind of matchup are definitely good to draw mana, advantage being a big part of it. Yeah, I could definitely see him boarding that Dust Bowl in. I think he may board in, Dust Bowl, Counterbalance. We might see a Vendilion Click coming in to fight the opposing clicks and also just be instant speed threat that he can deploy, answer that he can deploy. I think we'll see that Supreme Verdict to get around counter magic and hopefully take out a couple of creatures for Alex. Few options. Those the Blast and both the Blasts, Red Elemental and Pyro, I think will both definitely come in.
One of the cards I could see being a card I like. I know you don't like a Counterspell, but you know what? I just feel like this fight is so much about a grind that a Counterspell you'll have time to use. And Force of Will, it's a really interesting card in this fight because you can push for the Force of Will to get a Jace out, but in pretty much every other situation, the Force of Will is one of those cards you're really reluctant to have.
Yeah, in a mirror match, or not a mirror match, but a lot of similar cards, you don't want to be forcing if you can help it. Going down on a card when you have similar cards tends not to be good. They're very different decks, but there's a decent amount of crossover. I could see him boarding in that Counterspell. And he has some things to take out. I could see, against a more normal blue-white Stoneblade deck, I could see a couple of these Swords to Plowshares being shaved, but Donivan has Restoration Angel, Vendilion Click, Mystic, which fetches up Batterskull, so not the more resilient threats that we've seen, like something like Geist, so Alex may be best leaving all 4 swords in. It'll be interesting to see what he takes out. I'm not sure what I'd do here. He may take out the combo kills, as Donivan has some disruption. And we just see both players shuffling up. Alex up 1-0, really taking over game 1 with Jace the Mind Sculptor, Sensei's Divining Top, Counterbalance, and Detention Sphere, using his artifacts and enchantments and his Planeswalker to great effect. And both players looking like they're almost finished up shuffling. Hopefully we'll have this game underway for you soon.
You can see the clock there, 21 minutes left. That means that they've expended about 29 minutes in game 1. Now, if you are Donivan Abraham, that has to be concerning to you. To win 2 games.
Yeah, playing against a deck like Alex's, where really every card that's not a land is trying to keep Alex alive in some way. You know, Jace can bounce a creature, Elspeth can make blockers. We see Terminus, Energy Field, Swords, Counterspells, Mystic to get a Batterskull to gain life. Alex can make these games go really long, and it's going to be hard for either player to win quickly, as we saw in Game 1. So 20 minutes, not a lot of time for this matchup. And I would be surprised if we saw 3 games finish, but it could happen with a fast Stoneforge Mystic start. We'll see. And just curious, what equipment does Donivan have over here? We see Sword of Feast and Famine in his deck list, and then Umezawa's Jitte and that Batterskull. So he does have a sword that could be pretty good in this matchup if it starts connecting and having Alex discard cards.
Donivan Abraham here, while he is going to be on the play for this, Donivan Abraham not with much time left. Neither of these players wants a draw. Both of these players need a win to even be on the bubble for our top 8. It's very possible that if Alex or Donivan wins, they might not make the cut just quite.
Yeah, Donivan is at, looks like 6-1-1 with 19 points, and Alex with 18 points at 6-2.
Yeah, and Alex is the top X2 with just a huge gap between him and the next player. He is 5% ahead of the next player. And the thing about that is that when he plays, if he wins, he'll be with a bunch of other people who essentially what it's going to come down to with the tiebreaker math is if people are forced to play, how those games go, who wins, who loses. Both of these players basically on a hope and a prayer for this top 8 if they win.
Yeah, they're both, I think they're both live if they win. The snow-covered island comes down for Donivan, regular island for Alex, and Sensei's Divining Top. Plains for Donivan brings out that Stoneforge Mystic. So this could be a quick start we were talking about, the quick start Donivan needs. He does need this game to end quickly so he has time for a third one. As you were saying, these players do not want to draw.
One of the things I highly recommend if you are a fledgling legacy player playing some of these slower decks, take a cue from Nicholas Spagnolo and learn your decks so that you can play it very quickly so that you don't end up being in the position where an opponent who is playing at a reasonable pace might not actually die in time.
Yeah, it's a big risk in Legacy with all the shuffling from fetch lands, Sensei's Divining Top, just tons of cards that that take up time. We see Swords coming from Alex, and a very aggressive Force of Will removing Jace from Donivan, and Force Back from Alex removing Counterspells. So both players seem to understand that the clock is ticking down. Donivan wanting to really protect that Stoneforge, Alex not having any of it. We see a Jitte come down for Donivan.
I don't know how I feel about Jitte in this matchup.
I think I'm not really a fan of it, but it could be part of Donovan's plan for trying to end this game quickly, just figuring out some way that he can deal a bunch of damage. You see Sensei's Divining Top activation from Alex, looking at a few cards, deciding how this turn is going to go, and draws. I think we have looks like a Counterbalance, and Counterbalance comes down for Alex. That Counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top combo that we saw really dominate Game 1 when it came online.
Now, this moment is, I think, what I would call the moment of truth for Donivan. He has this moment to land something that's important enough to stop it.
Yeah, does Alex have a 2-mana spell in the top 3 cards of his library? Because Donovan's got that Stoneforge Mystic and that Spellstutter Sprite. And if Alex has that 2-drop, then it's, all but over for Donivan.
You see Donivan clap his hands together. Let's see what you got. That was a very quick.
Yeah.
Boom.
Ooh. And that Counterbalance on top of Alex's deck, revealed to the Counterbalance in play, is going to lock Donivan for the most part out of this game.
I kind of wonder if Donivan maybe should have used the Spell Stutter Sprite in response to the activation of the Sensei's Divining Top, and thus had Alex Binek tapped out so that it would have to be a naked flip of the counterbalance.
Yeah, that's definitely a play that could have left Donivan with
another chance.
Creature, but we see 5 lands now. Donivan is going to probably attempt that Batter Skull and put Alex to the test again. We'll see what he comes up with. We see, it looks like 2 Jace in Alex's hand, and 1 mystery card, as well as that Counterbalance and Sensei's Divining Top in play. 5 mana, and Batter Skull comes down.
What do you got on top? You got a 5-er?
Ooh.
And remember, Alex Binek also can just cast a counterspell from his hand. And we see Alex checking his sideboard just to have a sense of what possibilities that there are for his deck. He looks Brainstorm first, trying to get as deep as possible, plus the potential of putting a card back. That's the right casting cost.
Yep, we will see. Puts 2 back, looks at 3.
Uh-oh, that was oh, wow,
flip,
it hits.
And it resolves.
There's a germ.
Something you noted, Force of Will in this matchup. As Alex was going through his sideboard, I believe I saw 2 or 3 Force of Wills in there, so he did cut that number down.
It's just a very hard card to use in this matchup. There's nothing wrong with having Force of Will still in your deck, but it is not optimal, and you don't want 4, generally speaking, in a matchup like this.
Yep, we see the Germ come down with that Batter Skull. Oh, and Jace lands for Alex, bouncing that Germ.
Take that, Germ.
So, as we saw last game, Jace, Counterbalance, Sensei's Divining Top, looking to close this game out. I think that is a disenchant from Donivan, and Alex is tapped out. We'll see what's on top. I think Donivan really has to fire off that disenchant now. There's not going to be a better time. Big sigh and points at the Counterbalance. Does Alex have it? Reveals Force of Will. So that Counterbalance, is it going to go? We'll see. Looks like Alex may choose to activate Sensei's Divining Top here. He has already revealed to Counterbalance. So the Counterbalance won't be countering it, but the Force of Will on top of Alex's deck may be drawn and used to counter that. Okay, and we see a play that you talked about. In response to this activation, before anything else goes on, Donovan's going to get that Spell Stutter Sprite down, make sure he has a threat in play. Alex is all out of action. Donivan knows that Force of Will's on top. He knows the Spell Stutter Sprite is safe. We see Force of Will come down, removing Jace, countering the disenchant that threatened that Counterbalance.
So, a whole flurry of action, but at the end of it, Donivan Abraham has a Spellstutter Sprite in play. Unfortunately for him, he does have to deal with that Jace.
Yeah, it looks good right now, but it may be in his hand in just a second, and the top comes back down, threatening to lock that Spellstutter Sprite in Donovan's hand if Alex has a 2-drop that he can float on top of his deck.
Brainstorm ability, the 0 ability of Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yep, so we'll see. And Donivan chooses to return.
Pardon me, that's the Sensei's Divining Top that was being used there. And then we see that Alex actually does bounce the Spellstutter Sprite. That was the Sensei's Divining Top, looking at the top cards there. My bad.
And Alex, end of turn, activates top. Has to be a little careful not to tap out. If he does, we could see Donivan try to sneak that Spellstutter Sprite back in. Pretty threatening against the Jace with 1 counter. That doesn't happen though. Scalding Tarn comes down, and we'll see what Alex chooses to do. In good shape, although Donivan has a 1-drop and a 2-drop. And the more spells you can get in your hand, the more you can try to kind of force your Counterbalance opponent to maybe trip over themselves a little bit and let one resolve.
This time now, Alex does the Brainstorm ability, the 0 ability of Jace.
Yeah, and that 0, the Brainstorm really really turns on Counterbalance if it's not already active. Lets you put any of those cards in your hand back on top of your deck, then move them around with Sensei's Divining Top to just have a greater range of casting cost. We do see Scalding Tarn sacrificed here though, so not interested in any of those cards you put back. Gonna look at a fresh 3. So this could be a moment where Donivan has the ability to resolve some spells, depending on what the top 3 cards of Alex's deck are.
Sensei's Divining Top, checking out the top.
Yeah, and Donivan chooses to let that resolve. I think we see some spells, and Alex says, now my turn. Draws, plays a Scalding Tarn.
Fetch lands are so super ridiculous in this deck.
Yes.
Even more so than they are normally in Legacy.
Yeah, Brainstorm, Jace, Sensei's Divining Top. Alex just makes really good use of these fetch lands. So with that fetch land, Alex essentially can look at 6 cards with that Sensei's Divining Top. 3. If he doesn't like those, crack it, shuffle the deck, look at another 3. Jace goes up by 2. Not sure who it's targeting yet.
There are valid reasons to target yourself, particularly if you're just trying to get a little bit further in and give yourself a cushion on your Jace.
Yeah, he knows what he has on top because he activated Sensei's Divining Top recently. We're going to see...
Okay, Alex was targeting himself after all.
Yep, I'm not sure if that Jace +2 is resolved yet, or if this Spell Stutter Sprite is happening in response.
Yeah. The Spell Stutter Sprite is happening in response to the ability, apparently. And
okay.
This is a top in response to the Spell Stutter Sprite. So don't get confused. He did not just activate the +2 and the 0 of the Jace in the same turn sequence. This is the Sensei's Divining Top. One of the things that often happens in our coverage of events is that players will think, oh my god, something terribly awful just happened, and they just didn't realize some other effect was happening.
Yeah, and it's easy to get confused between Brainstorm, Ponder, Sensei's Divining Top, and Jace. All really commonly played cards. People picking up 3 cards off the top of their deck is a common motion. We are going to see that Fate Seal resolve. Alex puts the top card of his library on the bottom. Not interested in that one.
We do have a Spell Stutter Sprite in play now, and Donivan ready to come over. Maybe he's going to equip that Batterskull to that Sprite.
He could do that and
go all in?
Yeah, I mean, he can threaten the Jace here if that's the case. He's just going to attack.
I think I kind of like going all in there, just in case. I mean, if Alex has it, Alex has it. But if he doesn't, that could be the end of this Jace problem.
Yeah, I wonder what Donivan has in hand that he might want to be keeping that mana up for. So, Jace just pointing at it. Usually that indicates Brainstorm.
Wow, and, Restoration Angel.
Yeah, okay. We see Spell Pierce, Brainstorm, and Restoration Angel. The higher casting cost cards in Donovan's deck, like that Batterskull that we saw resolve through Counterbalance, like this Restoration Angel, more difficult to counter with a Counterbalance. Less cards in Alex's deck that cost that amount of mana. So we see the Brainstorm from Jace resolve, put a couple cards back. Now, we'll see what Alex chose to float there with the Brainstorm. If he's playing around a 4-drop, he's maybe playing around something else. 3 mana, Batterskull is going to come back to Donovan's hand. Sprite will untap. Donivan draws. Looks like another Brainstorm. So 2 Brainstorms, Spell Pierce, Batterskull, and Restoration Angel for Donivan. And a bunch of land, Jace, Counterbalance, and Sensei's Divining Top for Alex. Looks at the top 3. Just puts them back.
A quick comment to the people on Twitter who are a little unhappy with the comments about Jace in Vintage. The comments that were made were, we weren't sure if it's seeing play, and we know it's seeing play in Legacy. So, yes, if you are a Vintage player and you know that Jace the Mind Sculptor is a house in Vintage, I did say that our director agreed with you and that I did not know because I have not played Vintage with Jace, so... Just a real quick comment to all the people on the Twitter feed. Remember, hashtag SCGCIN to get involved in the conversation on Twitter. Back to our match in print. Alex Binek Still going with his library manipulation, brainstorming, jacing, enlightened tutoring, sensei's divining topping, basically just sculpting whatever he wants to have happen.
Yep, and we haven't seen, I don't think any of the spells on the table now have resolved yet. We see an enlightened tutor, then we see a spell pierce on Donovan's side, there's a brainstorm on Alex's side, so we're gonna have to wait and see how this all plays out in resolving. Alex pointing at his enlightened tutor, I think confirming that Donovan is targeting that spell with the spell pierce. Taps 2 mana, pays for that spell pierce. The stack is slowly unraveling. Brainstorm resolves here. Gonna give Alex the opportunity to put a couple cards on top and float with counterbalance, basically. Decide what he wants to leave there, what casting cost he wants to protect against.
Jace.
Flips a 4, counters that Restoration Angel. So everything going Alex's way in this exchange here. And chooses to tap Divining Top to draw that Jace, and then Enlightened Tutor. So he's losing the top, but I guess more interested in having a backup Jace than that top. His Jace may be not long for this world with that Spell Stutter Sprite.
Detention Sphere.
So nice card in Standard, also not too shabby in Legacy.
Now, we were talking before about Oblivion Ring as a card that has sometimes seen some Legacy play, and then we talked a little bit later about Supreme Verdict and the interesting abilities it has in Legacy, one of which is that blue part that goes with Force of Will. So here Alex Binek has the best of all of those worlds. He's got the blue that lets him toss a card like Detention Sphere away to a Force of Will, but at the same time, the Oblivion Ring-like ability of Detention Sphere, an incredibly versatile answer to so many different decks. Alex Binek uses the plus ability on himself, leaving the top card of his library there for now. Has in play Counterbalance, Sensei's Divining Top, Jace at 3 counters, and Donovan Abraham still fighting it out, draws a Mutavault, lays it into play. Looks like he's going to be equipping that Umezawa's Jite on the Spell Stutter Sprite, and it comes at probably the Jace.
Looks like that. Yeah, we see...
Boom.
So we see Volcanic Island tapped for a Pyroblast, which Alex did bring in and is using to good effect now. We see Donovan attempt to Brainstorm. Alex tapping Karakas to activate Sensei's Divining Top.
Pyroblast, arguably the best sideboard card of all time.
Yeah, really solid. I know I've played quite a few blue-white control decks in Legacy that have 1 or 2 red producing lands for a whole bunch of red blasts in my sideboard, and it's always been an all-star. Alex up 1-0 in this match, and the clock is under 3 minutes now.
A Brainstorm in response to the Sensei's Divining Top going on top. This successfully puts a Brainstorm resolution in Donovan's corner. It's a small victory. I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. That Brainstorm resolves. He allows the Sensei's Divining Top to counter his other Brainstorm, and he tosses a Force of Will, now knowing that the top of the library is a Sensei's Divining Top on that Pyroblast.
Yep, so well-played sequence there by Donovan. And he does get the Pyroblast countered. Okay, Sprite takes Jace down to 2. Jite goes up to 2, and we see a Mutavault added.
That's a lot of work to attempt to get 1 damage on the Jace and 2 counters on the Umezawa's Jite. And meanwhile, Alex Binek still has the counterbalance top. That top is on top. Has a Jace in play. I mean, it was an awesome battle, but I don't know that the war can be won.
Yeah, Alex even has a backup Jace in hand, so all this work Donovan's doing to try to take care of this first Jace, if he eventually does manage, I think we're going to see Alex just drop another Jace. And top comes back down, Alex passes, or does something, then activates Jace. Under a minute and a half left.
Just burying Donovan Now, the thing about this game, Alex does not even have to win this game. All he has to do is not die. Donivan Abraham, in fact, the best he can hope for is a draw. If he were to win this game in some miraculous fashion, that would cause a draw in the match. And, I don't know, a draw would knock both of them out. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see this match come to a draw.
I don't think so either.
Unless maybe they have some big time extension, but I don't see this happening. Spell Stutter Sprite comes across.
Our spotter from the floor, Patricia, our runner for the weekend, lets us know they do not have any time extensions at all, so this clock is correct.
Yep, under 1 minute and ticking down.
Terminus
Miracle.
as an instant.
Yeah, adding a little bit of insult to injury here, taking out that Sprite. Alex taking no chances. And
Donivan
handful of cards.
Aggressively taps Batter Skull. Sure, says Alex. I don't care.
I think we are going to see him say that. Yep, Germ comes down. Alex untaps that die, I believe, representing that.
The turn counter, perhaps.
I think Donivan is saying his turn will be turn 2, putting it on 2 and pointing at himself. I think we're on turn 1 now. The die is off screen, so we're not sure. And it is turn 1. Jace is going to be used to Fate's Heal here. And the Tension Sphere comes down, taking out that Batter Skull. Germ without a Batter Skull, not long for this world. Right off the screen. Volcanic Island used to get a top down. And Donivan, Scalding Tarn, turn 2 of extra turns, Mutavault gets activated, suits up with that GT, and it's going to look to come across. Donivan deciding whether to attack Alex or Jace, but Jace goes down to 2, GT gets 2 counters, top gets activated. They're playing out the motions here.
I mean, I kind of feel like Donivan is the rebels in most normal conflicts against a hugely superior force. This is not Star Wars, my friends. I don't think that we're going to see anything other than the planet being blown up.
Yeah. Donivan seeing what he can do. Alex with a full hand of cards, excuse me. And just like we saw in game 1, Jace counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top, locking down this game, shutting it down. Detention Sphere taking out an equipment. And we'll see Mutavault activated. This is turn 4 of extra turns. Comes across.
Swords to Plowshares.
Swords.
Alex Binek, no need to do this Swords to Plowshares. He's basically reminding me right now of a cat and a mouse.
These two guys just want to play as much Magic as possible. They want interactions.
And what you gonna do with your turn, buddy?
All right, there goes the Scalding Tarn. We'll see if Donivan wants to sacrifice his Scalding Tarn.
Well, I mean, it's possible that Alex could get a pseudo kill here.
He could.
Unless Donivan doesn't have another turn coming, because Donivan would have to draw before he would die.
Maybe Alex is looking to deck Donivan with the Helm of Obedience.
That's what I'm talking about. The pseudo kill, but he's going to require Donivan to draw a card. If Donivan doesn't have that turn, he doesn't actually get that win. It's going to be a 1-0-1 instead of a 2-0.
Yeah, I don't see how Alex can get his second game win.
Vendilion Click
comes down. Not sure who that's targeting. Ooh, Force of Will.
And
okay.
Donivan fetching, casting Force of Will. Alex
activating top.
Yeah, let's see what's going to happen here.
While. Not sure what he wants to draw first and second with all the turns left in this game.
Batterskull says, you know what? Everything you do, I can do better.
So Counterbalance has countered about 40 or 50 spells just this match.
Goodness gracious.
And Jace going to the bottom with Vendilion Click. I hope we understand right, and they are in extra turns.
Yeah,
They're not playing like they are.
They don't seem to be playing like they're in extra turns. Were they giving it an extension? We were told that they were not, but they keep playing. Okay, this is turn 5.
Scalding Tarn. Alex.
I kind of wonder if Donovan's like, okay, I mean, I'm not done yet. If you scoop it up, that's you conceding, right?
He could be. That could be his thinking. Alex putting a little more money on the table with an unhinged island. And picks up 3 cards.
He's like, I don't have the kill. I'm trying to get the kill here.
I think he may be looking for that 2-0 win. Enlightened Tutor. I think he may actually be lamenting exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's going to be Donovan's not going to have the draw step. Draws the Rest in Peace.
These two guys love playing Magic, I
Casts
can say that.
the Rest in Peace. Casts the Helm of Obedience. Short. And Donovan's
there goes
Donovan's library is gone, but unfortunately for Alex Binek, it's going to be a 1-0-1 victory because in extra turns, Donovan Abraham, he doesn't have a turn to get, so it's going to be a 1-0-1 unless Donovan gives the scoops there. Alex Binek, we'll call it unofficial 2-0 victor in his heart.
Yeah, very hard-fought battle by Alex to try to get that second game win. It was definitely going to be somewhere between 1-0 and 2-0.
Yep. Now he gets the the honorary 2-0 degree, but unfortunately his real degree is 1-0-1.
Yeah, officially that's what this match will be recorded as, but you know that if you just had one more turn,
but you know, how often do you say that? If I only had one more turn.